Well, hello everyone. Kevin Vachon here, and I'm the COO of MEF, and I am going to be your host for today's webinar. Welcome. Glad to have you with us. Today I'm going to be joined by, sorry about that, just the right direction. Going to be joined by a group of participants here. I've got Stan Hubbard, MEF's longstanding principal analyst, Daniel Bar-Lev, our longstanding chief product officer, and Ian Fu, who's the CTO and EVP of product at Cyber Ratings. And I should point out that this program that we're going to be exploring today is really the result of a longstanding collaborative effort between Cyber Ratings and MEF, really the result of joint collaboration, and we appreciate their contributions. In terms of the target audience today is really the webinar is targeted at a service provider audience primarily. It's obviously applicable to vendors and enterprises as well, but that is what the material is particularly targeted at. We're going to talk about the threat environment initially, and really the requirement or the need for industry collaboration. We'll provide a good, solid overview of the program itself, focus in a little bit on the benefits for the service provider community and how they deliver benefits to enterprises. Then we're going to go, quite deep into the testing methodology itself, exactly what's testing. And lastly, we'll touch on what resources we're making available to certified companies so you can maximize your investment. Now, at the end of that, we'll have time for Q&A. You can post your questions to the chat. You can post them to me. You can post them to everyone, whatever you prefer. And after the webinar, probably tomorrow, you will receive an email with a link to the recording as well as a survey. So we realize that the time isn't convenient for everybody. So if you like it, you can forward it on to your colleagues. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stan Hubbard, our principal analyst, to kick things off.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be here today with you. So what I wanted to do is just walk us through the threat environment and just kind of put some context around that and why SASE is such an attractive solution to deal with the problems that the industry, well, multiple industries face. If we can move on to the next slide. Multiple factors are really creating an unprecedented risk of major cyber attacks. Many of the major factors are listed here. We have a rapidly growing digital economy, and that's really expanding the cyber attack surface worldwide. The more we accelerate digital transformation, we actually increase the risk of cyber attacks. The escalating vulnerabilities and the cyber attacks that are out there are simply overwhelming cybersecurity experts and the cyber defenses that they have. And that's a common message that we heard throughout 2024 and into 2025. AI and cybercrime as a service, they're lowering the barriers to entry and enabling cyber attacks with unprecedented scale, sophistication, and speed. And then on top of all that, we've got this worldwide shortage of skilled cybersecurity experts, and that's exposing organizations to greater risks. And then last but not least, we've got the rising geopolitical instability, which is fueling more aggressive cyber attacks against critical infrastructure. The 16 major categories of critical infrastructure that are just really under attack it's just the risks are going exponential in those areas. The cost of cybercrime is exploding worldwide. These are some updated numbers. We shared some of this information, most of this information in our State of the Industry report focused on SASE, and we've updated some of the numbers here for you. We've got about $10.5 trillion would be the global cost of cybercrime worldwide. That's more than the size of the GDP of Germany and Japan combined. Cybersecurity spending, it's really not keeping pace with the threats. You've got about $201 billion worth of spending on information security and risk management. And that's about 8% of the amount of money that IDC estimates is being spent on digital transformation. And to put that in the context of the spending to counter cyber crime, it's only about 2% of the total cost of global cyber crime. So it's a very paltry amount of money being spent to protect industries worldwide. So, this information here is updated. This is from Checkpoint, and it really goes into highlighting the fact that the risks are continuing to increase across a wide variety of industries. The average number of attacks, weekly attacks against organizations, is about 44% higher than it was even in 2024, and that was an explosive year. Education, government, healthcare, telecommunications are the major categories where the cyber attacks are happening. And many are probably familiar with the terms Volt Typhoon or Salt Typhoon. These are very important areas of attack against the critical infrastructure. And it's just to put this in context a little bit more, Microsoft produces its annual cyber threat report, or what's called digital defense report, and they have highlighted that more than 600 million cyber criminal and nation state attacks happen every single day against their customers. And they've identified 15,000 plus unique threat groups that they have to track. So this is absolutely massive challenge that we all face. So just to kind of summarize here, I think the key message that we have in this webinar is that we must collaborate, we must standardize to accelerate market solutions to address these threats. The cyber threats are simply outpacing our ability to deal with them. Organizations should prioritize essential actions to strengthen defenses. CIS has done a nice job of providing a summary of those actions and giving people tools, and many other industry organizations and government organizations are providing great tools as well. Suppliers must embrace secure by design, secure by default, and standardized solutions to deal with the threats. And then the other thing I think that's becoming more and more evident, especially in the United States, is that the private sector is under greater pressure to carry the burden for defending the critical infrastructure. The government's going through a lot of turmoil right now. We have the potential for a third of the cybersecurity workforce at CIFSA to be, basically to be let go, or they may depart on their own. And more and more concern is being expressed about the fact that the cybersecurity is, challenges with the government leadership is exposing the industries throughout the country to a greater risk of cyber attacks. So that's the threat environment. It's not looking good. People are being overwhelmed. Cybersecurity experts have constantly talked about how they're carrying more burden than they want or they can possibly carry. And then, so what's the answer? Well, we believe that SASE is really critical to addressing the need for a secure digital transformation. You've got the increased use of cloud services, the rise of remote work and hybrid work. You have the need to apply zero trust principles. It's really fueling explosive demand for SASE, which solves the problem of protecting users, devices, and applications at scale. And so I'll hand off to Daniel, who'll go into more about what we're doing on the SASE front.
Thank you, Stan, for that excellent introduction to the need for SASE and for the program that I'm going to introduce here. So MEF has developed the industry's first SASE certification program to support the service providers and the technology providers that are providing the solutions that aim to deal with these cybersecurity threats that have been laid out. And this certification program effectively is built on three pillars of SD-WAN, SSE, and Zero Trust. Over the last few years, MEF has been, and its members have been doing a lot of work to define standards that can underpin the industry standardized terminology and constructs and architectures. And using those standards, we've brought together this SASE certification program, where SD-WAN, SSE, and Zero Trust can be certified individually under an umbrella of the SASE certification program. But it's very important when developing a program like this to match the requirements of the certification testing to the capabilities of the market. And it takes time for the market, for the technology providers and the service providers to develop their capabilities and deal with these threats that are constantly evolving. So the certification program is designed to match the capabilities of the industry, but to set the bar at the higher end of what's available in the market at any given time. So we're going to describe phase one of the certification program. That's where we currently are. And that's based on testing of the vendors in each of these areas of SD-WAN, SSE, and Zero Trust, and enabling service providers to inherit that certification from their technology provider partners. The next phase after this will be the ability of service providers to test in-network their cybersecurity capabilities to be tested and to receive certification based on that. And then ultimately in phase three, to be able to pull all these components together in a complete offering and to test them in an integrated way. But that's further down the road. Phase two, we're aiming to understand and define the requirements towards the end of this year and to roll out the phase two in 2026. So where are we with the MEF-SASE certification program? As I said, certification is based on testing of the technology providers in each of these areas. And it's aimed at aligning stakeholders on common terminology and expectations to build trust and confidence among the service providers using the technology and their customers, the enterprises, to maximize the transparency of the vendors, what they're capable of, and the effectiveness of their products, and ultimately to accelerate the adoption of these cybersecurity technologies, SD-WAN, SSE, and Zero Trust. Phase one also enables, and this is very important, service providers to inherit the certification of the technology providers that they are using. All of this has been developed closely with our partners, Cyber Ratings, an authorized test and certification partner of MEF. And our colleague Ian from Cyber Ratings will be talking in more detail about what is tested. So let's talk about the benefits for the enterprises. First of all, having an industry-neutral certification program, and as I said, this is the first and unique framework for this, simplifies their ability to procure and select their providers and accelerate that shortlist that they need to create. It provides more confidence when they're buying SASE solutions because the certification program is aligned with MEF standards in this area, and it enables the enterprises to keep track and assure that they're still keeping up with all the evolving security and compliance regulatory requirements. What are the benefits for the service providers? Well, first of all, it gives them a competitive advantage as well as credibility, shows leadership in the market, and it enables them to independently validate what they have purchased from their technology provider partners in terms of security and application performance. It enables them to speed up procurement, to streamline the RFI and RFP responses, and of course to accelerate the shortlist placement of technology providers. And it highlights the resilience for the service providers of their ability to, their resilience against cyber security attacks. The program doesn't just rely on the testing of the technology providers. The program actually offers additional options for the vendors, which can then be transitioned into the service providers that inherit the certification. Things like detailed pre-testing before the certification testing, diagnostic reports, detailed reports from the actual certification itself, exploit library, which is constantly evolving, making that available, and methodology scripts. So it's not just about the actual testing itself and passing or failing, but the environment around that supports the certification. So what's the process for service providers to get certified? Well, based on having a technology provider in-house that they are using that is certified, they request the certification information kit, they schedule a session with us to plan around the certification agreement, and they complete a questionnaire, a simple questionnaire. And then MEF validates that they are eligible based on the technology provider that they're using, and the subscription is purchased by the service provider, and they are awarded an inherited certification based on the technology provider's capabilities. As you can see, AT&T have provided us with a quote, and they're one of several service providers that have already gone through this process. One of the output of the certification is a report card. It's provided for each technology provider, and it provides details of obviously the provider and the date of the certification, what hardware and software was tested, and a range of key parameters around that, sufficient to show that the technology provider has passed the certification requirements. And who do we have that's certified to date? On the technology provider side, we have leading players: Palo Alto Networks, Versa, VMware, Fortinet, and it's important to note that we have a significant number of additional technology providers in the SD-WAN, SSE, and Zero Trust space that are lined up to get tested and certified themselves. So this group will be growing, but as you can see, these are market leaders and form a core group on which the service provider industry can rely for their own certifications. And who are the service providers that have already undertaken this process of inheriting certification from the technology providers? We have Liberty, Latin America, Colt, Sparkle, Vodafone, Orange, Comcast, AT&T, British Telecom, TPG Telecom, Verizon, Lumen, Console Connect, and CMC Telecom. So we've got a broad range across the world in terms of geography and size, and this is just the beginning of the phase one of the SASE certification program. So I'll hand off to our colleague Ian Fu from Cyber Ratings to talk in more detail about the testing itself.
Great, thanks Daniel, appreciate it. Thanks for joining us today. Let me start by giving everyone a little bit of background about Cyber Ratings, who we are. We are a MEF testing partner and a collaborator on this SASE certification program and the testing methodologies around the validation and evaluation of the technologies that comprise the certification program. So a little background about Cyber Ratings. We are a 501c6 nonprofit organization that is dedicated to driving transparency in the cybersecurity technology space through the publication of reports and data around the testing and evaluation of cybersecurity technology. Our team brings together several decades of experience across various roles, senior and leadership roles in evaluating and validating cybersecurity technologies and products through the conduction of in-depth testing. And we have a very storied history in doing this across multiple technology areas. If you're interested in all of the technology areas we test, you can find those on our website. But more specifically, in relation to the MEF-CECP certification program, we are the testing partner who has helped work with MEF to co-develop the methodologies necessary to test the component technologies within this program. So what we bring to the table is the know-how and the ability and expertise to provide certification and validation through rigorous testing of the component technologies found within the SASE space. More specifically, in this first phase of the program, we apply our methodologies and tools and capabilities to test the three component technologies of SD-WAN, Zero Trust, and Security Service Edge in order to ensure that the critical core functionality for each of those component technology areas is met by the vendor products that are being tested and certified. It's important to note that when we talk about the MEF certification program being a standardized testing program, what's interesting here is that traditionally when people hear standards, they think interoperability, they think implementation standards. What we're actually talking about as an extension of those capabilities in MEF here is the standardization of testing to achieve a baseline set of deterministic outcomes and functional components to ensure that those components are able to deliver the features required and the capabilities required for their respective areas. And so this allows us to create a program in which all vendors and vendor products are tested to the same set of key metric criteria so that when a vendor is tested and certified, service providers or enterprises leveraging their technology can be assured that those technologies are capable of delivering the core functionality to a level that's acceptable to be used at the service provider level or at the enterprise level, thereby reducing risk to the service provider's brand in delivering their solutions, the enterprise customer and their information, as well as the entire ecosystem that is leveraging these particular technologies. So let's start by looking at what we do in SD-WAN testing. In our SD-WAN testing methodology, the entire methodology is developed around a core premise of determining whether a product or solution is actually able to reliably deliver applications according to the business requirements using a mix of public and private transport, right? So that's the core premise of SD-WAN. And our testing and testing methodology is designed to determine if a product or solution is actually able to do this to a standardized set of metrics to be certified. And some of the dimensions we test for are the critical core functionality you would expect from an SD-WAN component, like routing and access control. But above and beyond that, we test for things like application performance. Can the SD-WAN solution deliver applications, not just in best case scenarios, which you'll typically see in some forms of testing, but can it deliver that application performance in real world scenarios and worst case scenarios when that delivery capability is really needed by a service provider or an enterprise, right? We also test for, previous slide. We also test for application classification. Is the solution able to recognize the difference between business critical and non-business critical applications so that we can also test the application assurance? Is the SD-WAN able to differentiate between business critical and non-business critical when there's contention in the network or impairment in the network to thereby prioritize the business critical traffic above best effort or non-business critical traffic? And these are all key components to application assurance and the ability for an SD-WAN to deliver when needed. In addition to the SD-WAN technology area, we also test for security effectiveness in security service edge solutions. And there, the core question to the methodology is, based on our testing, can we evaluate or determine using data whether the product or solution actually provides effective protection against real-world threats that organizations are facing on a daily basis? And to do this, we subject the product and technologies to a number of real-world samples across a number of threat dimensions. So for example, we use our exploit library, which is a library drawn from a backend library of 250,000 plus known exploits or vulnerabilities rather, to which we develop exploits to be applied in our testing. An exploit is a method used by threat actors to take advantage of a weakness or vulnerability in software or a computer system to gain unauthorized access or to maliciously impact the system. In addition to exploits, we test for malware, which is harmful software designed to damage or disrupt. We draw from a library of over 1 million malware samples found in the wild to test these systems to see if they're effective at protecting against malware. Where we really excel is in evasion testing. Evasions are techniques that are used by threat actors to avoid and evade security systems to not detect, so that they can actually implement or deliver exploits or malware without detection. And we use an extensive library of evasions to test platforms against their resistance to evasions, effectively helping us to surface data in terms of functionality so that we can help service providers, enterprises, and other organizations make informed decisions about the effectiveness of the platforms they're choosing. And finally, we also test for zero trust. Our zero trust testing is designed to answer the question of whether solutions can actually deliver on the promised components and capabilities of a zero trust architecture. And so what are those core capabilities? We test around identity, device, and location context awareness. Is the zero trust solution able to take into account those dimensions in providing authentication and authorization to applications and services? We also test against application and service policy granularity, down to the user and specific application to provide control that is promised by Zero Trust. We also test for SSL and TLS functionality and cipher support to ensure that they support the critical encryption and decryption capabilities necessary in today's world of protecting data in flight. And we also test against very essential capabilities today in the modern cloud world for identity provider integration and single sign-on integration to provide a more seamless user experience and thereby have a baseline not just of security functionality, but also user experience and functionality.
Thank you, Ian. We have a couple of questions coming in, which I'll be directing your way a little bit later when I'm done here. But one of the things we're trying to do is really to really help the service providers get value from their certification, help them promote the certification. Obviously, you've already seen about our registries and what is published on the registry, the report card, and so on and so forth. But we have a full kit available to those companies that get certified, which provides an intro to the kit. It provides a sample press release, so you can amplify that, social media templates for promotional posts. Importantly, as well, information that you can give to your sales team. Who is MEF, about the certification program, why are we certified? What does it mean to our customers? And, in the sales business, we always like to influence RFPs. We have an RFI template that you can hand to your service providers, or an RFP template, if you want to call it that. So it's content that they could put in their RFPs. And we are also marketing that directly to enterprises to help educate that community as well. So there's a number of resources available. If you go to MEF.net into the whole cybersecurity and SASE area, you'll see the aforementioned template. Stan very briefly touched on the State of the Industry report on SASE, which we published last year. And of course, SASE plays an extremely important role in the secure network as a service of the future. MEF has produced 2 years now in a row an evolving document called our NAS Industry Blueprint, as well as a NAS Customer Experience White Paper, looking at it from an enterprise perspective. That'll have a new version coming out soon. But all of these NAS-oriented documents bring SASE into the picture as a critical element of network as a service. For those of you that are members, we have our upcoming, what we call our Member Summit coming up in London in about 4 weeks' time, hosted by BT, and SASE will be on the agenda there, both in terms of where we're going with the program, but also the work that the committees are doing themselves. So you can go to MEF.net and click into the appropriate page there. When you get this document from us, the links will actually work to the registration page. And also, some of you have probably been to our Global NAS event. We're thrilled to be doing this again. You can see the focus this year, accelerating NAS innovation for an AI-powered digital world. Not surprisingly, AI is surfacing to the top as an important topic, and it's a topic which is highly connected to network as a service. But as I said, SASE will be an important part of the G&E agenda as well, connecting those dots. Network as a service, gne.mef.net is available. On May 1, we will have our Excellence Awards, and SASE will play in there as well in terms of categories. The current web environment shows last year's awards, so you can see what that looked like. The pages will be available May 1. Anybody that's on this list will be receiving an email from us. And I guess in conclusion, I think Stan did a great job of really, and it's no surprise to anybody, the growing nature of the threat environment. But also what we've seen emerging over years now is the emergence of SASE and SD-WAN to playing a critical role in supporting securing enterprises and their digital transformations. But why is a MEF involved? Well, we're a collaboration vehicle, and the industry has told us that we can't work in silos here. Enterprises need to be working with service providers and working with the vendor community. And so we're the collaboration platform to help bring these solutions together. We're not the only entity in the industry working on cybersecurity work, but we've really leveraged our long-standing history in delivering useful certification programs and combining that with the cybersecurity expertise of cyber ratings to bring what we think is a very strong multi-phase program. So that's our message today, is we hope that you get certified, or at least take a look at it and give yourself that competitive edge. With that, I'm going to turn it over to questions. I'm going to stop the sharing here, and I'll ask my participants to join me by video. We do have a few questions from the audience, and I'm going to start with one from Dan Pitt, a well-known participant contributor to MEF. Dan, you're asking, and I think maybe this is a question for Ian. You're asking to say a little bit more about what we inherit from vendors. Now, I know you posted this before Ian's presentation, but perhaps Ian, you can just touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, the inheritance of the certification for a CSP, what that really represents is that so if we look at the certification program and we go back to what I mentioned earlier in terms of functional effectiveness testing, what the certification really represents is an assurance in meeting the functional capabilities of that particular technology area, which is really key, especially when you look at areas like security, right? The question is that, well, one thing we know is that not all security solutions are built equally. And the question is, how do you know how effective a particular technology is at what it's supposed to be doing? And in the security space, a misassumption in that space can be detrimental, right, to you and your customers. So that inheritance of the certification assures that the solution the service provider may be providing based on a particular underlying technology vendor is also transpiring, or by association and delivery is also delivering that level of assurance through that technology certification. And what that mark means is that it's meeting the critical minimum functional criteria necessary to be effective in this particular space. So if you're deploying SSE, you know that your SSE is actually protecting you and your customers, which is critical to protecting your brand and your customers. Hopefully that helps explain it a little more.
Great, thanks, Ian. Another one, I think, and Daniel or Stan, just please jump in if you have anything to add here. But I think, Ian, this is probably targeted at you, is what's the reason SD-WAN testing does not include security effectiveness?
So SD-WAN testing, the SD-WAN test program itself is primarily focused on the application delivery assurance and transport, if you will, of the underlying network, true to SD-WAN. There actually is some minimal security testing in that space in terms of routing segmentation and access control. We didn't talk about them in here because the dimensions we test for are much more extensive than the core points we touched on in this presentation. But if anyone's interested in all of the dimensions that are tested, our methodologies are publicly available on cyberratings.org, and you can download the SD-WAN methodology and see all of the dimensions are tested. Beyond routing segmentation and access control, deeper security technologies like inspection, we test those under the security service edge umbrella, if you will. So those security functions are typically where we get into stateful inspection or deep packet inspection. Those are typically tested under our SSE umbrella as part of the services delivered in a security service edge.
I'd like to add for those that may be a little less familiar with how MEF works, that there are actually three stakeholders, if you like, in the certification program. The cyber ratings are our test partner. There's the MEF and let's call it the MEF framework, the staff, the program managers, and then you've got the members. And the members can actually influence through the test and certification committee how the program evolves, what it includes and so on. Obviously, consensus has to be built up between all the stakeholders, but the members do have a voice. They do have a seat at the table, so to speak. And in fact, we very much want their inputs, you know, how they want the program to evolve. We talked about phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, but even within phase 1, there are always improvements to be made and things to be emphasized. So we do urge our members to participate in the test and certification committee and influence the program.
A couple more questions here. One is sort of an opinion and a question. There's a few parts to this. I'm going to touch on the first one. It's from Michelle. And she's saying, if the vendors go through this, why does MEF require the service providers, SIs or MSPs, to go through the same process? Well, I think we don't require them to go through the same process. Daniel, maybe you can just recap the concept of inheritance.
Yes, so the service providers are not per se tested themselves. By virtue of having or using a particular certified technology provider with the appropriate product in their offering, they are basically able to highlight to their customers the fact that that they are using that certified product and what's behind that. So there isn't testing for the service providers, but there is the ability to take what has been achieved by their technology provider partners and make that very visible to the market and to their customers.
And two other parts to that, Michelle's asking, you know, what's the process? I mean, there's a validation process where we validate that the service provider is actually using the service provider, the certified technology through questionnaires and official purposes. She's asking that, so I think I can confirm that. And then she's
we did have that slide in the deck, which where Mike Troiano's picture is, and it lays out the steps for the service providers to inherit the certification.
There's also a comment about a market comment itself about the, you know, the MSPs in the space and system integrators and enterprise buying preferences. We'll leave that alone. But that's a you know, valid comment, citing some industry analysts. But she's asking, you know, could an SI or an MSP go through this same inheritance process if they are in fact delivering these types of service?
Yes, there's a possibility of that. We haven't focused the program on that yet. We've really addressed the needs of our service provider members, but there is an opportunity, as was highlighted by the question. And again, that's something that the members can discuss with us in the test and certification committee. But yes, that's very much something that we're interested in exploring further. I do see that there's a question from Alex about what happens in multi-vendor situation. And what we've seen until now is that service providers will choose one technology provider for each area that they, you know, for SD-WAN or for SSE or Zero Trust, it's their choice. So if they have a stronger partner in a given technology area, then they'll choose that. So one inheritance per area, and they can choose to choose more than one vendor across the board.
Great. And there was a follow-up from Dan. Does the CSP inherit official certification from the vendor or simply the protections? Not quite sure I understand that, but maybe you guys do.
I think what Dan's asking is essentially they're able to take that report card and associate it with themselves. Yes, that's the idea, that what's been achieved by the vendor during testing can be represented out to their customer base as well.
And the next question is around methodologies from Basil. Is it the intent to have a separate cert test for each of the components, the Zero Trust, SSE, SD-WAN, et cetera, or is it one cert test for the entire solution? So do we really have separate suites or one suite that does all? That's maybe Ian.
Yeah, I believe that question is more specifically around the service provider specific testing, and at this time, that's sort of our phase 2 and is to be determined. And this is where Daniel's point on input from the membership would be valuable to us in helping to steer that direction. At this point in time, we haven't determined whether it would be individual components or a singular combined component, and they're not mutually exclusive. You can actually have both. But this is where input from our service provider members would be extremely valuable in sharpening that phase of the program.
And if I could just add to that, an example, testing, in a cybersecurity environment or, offering, when we're testing non-cybersecurity type of technologies, it's a lot less intimidating for service providers. But when you're actually doing some of the cybersecurity testing on a live network, there are a lot of issues that need to be thought through beforehand, and we need to make sure that the service providers are willing and able to support the type of testing that we have in mind. So that input that we need from the service providers is very important before we actually implement phase 2.
There's a marketing question. And what can you tell us about demand from enterprises that their CSEs be certified? I think we're at an early stage there. MEF's program for enterprises was launched about a year and a half ago with the formation of our Enterprise Leadership Council with 3 or 4 enterprises, and now we have 14 global enterprises participating. They're having a very substantial impact on how they shape some of our programs, including the automation area and the security area. And we're in the process of upgrading our content to make it more enterprise friendly, to be launched in the next couple of months. And with that, we will have a more sustained, formalized program to market to enterprises, which will kick in before the summer and probably accelerate post-summer in September. So we're just getting started there.
And also, what we're starting to see across the industry is, aside from the MEF RFP template that was created and recently discussed, previously discussed, there are a number. We're starting to see the requests for third-party testing and certifications appear in a number of RFPs around the industry. So our understanding is that, from the perspective on the signals we're getting, is that enterprises are aware of this capability and that it is becoming an important dimension to them to assure the capability and functional capability of a particular solution before they purchase it or acquire it. And this is becoming even more so true as people are shifting towards this network as a service or cloud-based services. They're relinquishing control on infrastructure they once owned and had ultimate control over and could change manage. Now they're outsourcing that in exchange for convenience and scalability, operational simplicity. But in relinquishing control, it becomes a supply chain issue. And when you tie it back to that supply chain issue, there needs to be some governance over the supply chain to assure the quality of that supply chain. And we see that snowballing.
Cool. And Stan, obviously you were encouraged by the service provider community to produce the RFI template contents because they wanted to themselves use that as a tool to help educate their customers, right?
Right. Yeah. So this is one of the first deliverables, for the enterprise community. You mentioned the Enterprise Leadership Council. It's exciting to see their perspectives come in, and actually one of the members of the Enterprise Leadership Council contributed to the development of the RFI. It's basically called the Certified SASE RFI for Enterprises. And when we go into, a whole set of questions that they would typically want to ask as they're looking to evaluate SD-WAN and SASE solutions. The other thing I would mention is, you've talked about the G&E event. That's a great opportunity to engage with the whole community that's looking at this whole transformation as we go from SD-WAN to SASE and rolling SASE up underneath a NAS umbrella. And that includes the enterprises, the service providers, the technology vendors, all coming together to share their perspectives on this transformation and to hopefully align on a common approach as they look to orchestrate across those supply chains.
Funny you should mention Genie, Stan. I just happened to have my Genie pillow behind me on the screen here. Just by coincidence, it was there today. Always promoting something, right?
Yeah. The other thing I would add also is, in our State of the Industry report on SASE, which was produced last year, we actually brought in, and I think this is the first example of this actually happening. We brought in industry-leading analysts, about 8 different industry analyst firms: Avid, Think, Del Oro, Frost & Sullivan, Gartner, IDC, Omdia, Telegeography, Vertical Systems, all to share their perspectives underneath this State of the Industry report umbrella, and to contribute in their own way to help the industry move forward. We bring these types of players also into our G&E event. So what we're doing is really building out the community that will help accelerate the implementation of these technologies.
I think that's a great wrap up. Gentlemen, any other comments before we close?
I'll just say that the emphasis of MEF is to minimize market fragmentation, to get the market as large as possible, and for everybody's benefit, to maximize the adoption of cybersecurity solutions and SASE solutions specifically. And certification underpins that. It's a very, very important component of a growing and healthy market. We saw that with carrier Ethernet, and we believe that it's very important here with SASE as well. That's why we're putting so much work into this.
So thank you to everybody that attended today, and especially to those that produced some really good questions. I was impressed with the questions for the audience, and of course to Ian, Daniel, and Stan. Great job as always. As I mentioned at the outset, if you didn't hear me, you'll be receiving a follow-on email, which will probably tomorrow, which will have links to the presentation available in the recording, as well as a survey. We certainly appreciate getting your feedback. You can expect to see more webinars this year from MEF, and we'd like to take your feedback into consideration as we build on that. So thank you very much, and have a great day.